All right, let's do this, people. Better late than never. The Kaufman Corner podcast is streaming live right now. If you're catching us via the podcast later on, remember we stream live Sunday nights at 10 is our normal time, but because I was traveling yesterday, the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, agreed to move us back to Monday. So if you've been wondering all day Monday, where is your Kaufman Corner podcast? It'll be there in the wee hours of Tuesday morning as we are broadcasting here at 10 o'clock on a Monday night. And as I said, with us as always, the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, co-author of Rob and Rany on the Royals. He's done it all. Grantland. I think he wrote for the Yoo-Hoo Times. Just about everything. He's done
Quite
it.
possible, yes.
Yes. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, and much to cover tonight, Randy. By the way, if you are catching us on the podcast, when you catch us on the stream, we'd love your likes, your loves. Hit that love button. It doesn't cost you anything. Goes a long way towards helping us with the podcast. Of course, tell your friends. Hit the retweets when we put the tweets out about the podcast. Goes a long way for us. Thank you very much. We do appreciate it. Of course, if you're catching us on the podcast, we can see your comments. You can be a part of the conversation in the chat room if you're watching us live on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. Randy, let's start with the Royals moving Carlos Santana. I think a lot of Kansas City thought there might not be a time when this day would come. It has come. Your reaction to them getting him traded and your reaction to what they got.
Yeah, it's been a serendipitous 24-hour delay for our podcast, because if we'd done this last night, Santana wouldn't be in Seattle and Vinnie wouldn't be in Kansas City. So a lot has changed. On the other hand, the Royals have given up 10 runs tonight, so not everything has changed. But the Santana trade, look, I have to give the Royals credit on this one, because we were all ready to cut bait, not just cut bait, just throw overboard Carlos Santana about a month ago, and get on with the Vinnie Pasquantino experience and give Pasquantino a chance in the major leagues. And on the one hand, you have to give the Royals credit for sticking with him. He had a remarkable turnaround in June. I don't have the exact number. I think he hit like 350 with like a 480 on base and 570 slugging, give or take, here in the month of June, and kind of rescued his season. I mean, he has a 98 OPS plus, Carlos Santana, on this season, which, not great for a first baseman, but not completely useless either. And the Royals were able to convince, at least one trading partner, than the Seattle Mariners, who are everybody's trading partner, that the recent turnaround was for real, that this is more what the Carlos Santana that are likely to get going forward. If we had done the show yesterday, I was going to bring up the Carlos Santana, turnaround, but in the context of, okay, now that he's actually established himself as having some value, what really can they get for him? And I was going to point to the Jorge Soler trade from last year, where very similar situation, where a guy with an established track record of being able to hit was just god awful for 2 months. The Royals stuck with him. He started to hit right before the deadline, and they were finally able to turn him into a player. But the guy they got for him is an A-ball reliever that nobody really cares about. I figured that would be sort of the return they would get for Santana. So if they'd gotten either one of these players, they got Wyatt Mills and William Fleming. Those are the names. Both of them pitchers. Wyatt Mills is a guy who's already pitched in the major leagues. He's bounced around between AAA and the majors the last 2 seasons, but in AAA the last 2 years, he has 68 strikeouts in 48 and a third innings against 14 walks, I believe, in the numbers. He did rank in the top 30 Mariners prospect a couple years ago. He throws from a low sidearm delivery, I should say low 3/4, a little bit above sidearm, and can get it up to 97. I have to see him pitch to really to say more, but the similarity to someone like a Jose Cuas, it gives the Royals like 2 guys who come from a really low arm delivery, which I think is a really useful piece to have in your bullpen. I think having those guys pitch back to back is probably not a good idea. You don't want to, if you have one anomalous pitching motion is great. If you have 2 back to back, then suddenly the anomaly becomes normal, and pitcher and batters can square that up better. But he's an interesting arm, and he might be in the majors later this year. So if the Royals had just gotten him, I'd say not a bad trade. If they had just got William Fleming, I'd say not a bad trade, because Fleming was a guy who's just drafted last year. He's an 11th round pick, but was impressive enough in 2 months of A-ball last year as an 11th rounder that he was on some top 30 Mariners prospects lists coming into this season, which is kind of unusual for a guy who's just drafted and not in the first 10 rounds. And I think he's a kind of a tall, lanky guy. I want to say 6'6", if I recall. 6'6" and 220. So tall and lanky. Also can get it up into the mid-90s. Has been starting in A-ball all year, 68 innings, 24 walks, 59 strikeouts. Could be nothing, could be something. That's the sort of return I would have expected for Santana. That the Royals got both of them speaks well to what they got. It speaks well to John Sherman for being willing to pick up most of Santana's salary. As I understand, the Mariners are only on the hook for $1.5 million the rest of the season. I think he's due something like $6 to $7 million on his contract the rest of the year. He's making 10.5 for the whole season. And the one thing I do like about this is that while they got a guy who's on the 40-man roster in Mills, Fleming is a guy who was just drafted last year, so you don't have to worry about protecting him on the 40-man for another 2.5 years. The Royals have a lot of 40-man roster issues coming up with all the guys from the 2018 and 2019 drafts hitting the 40-man roster. So getting a guy who you can push that decision off for a while is going to be useful. So I'll give them credit. They got some decent talent here, and more than I would have expected a month ago.
The most encouraging thing out of everything you said was the Royals ate money. That's something that they just
100%.
They would not do it under David Glass. And, it has to be simply viewed as buying prospects. Like, that's what you're doing. It's no different than when they would splash around $8 million in a draft pool or splash around a lot of money in Latin America. That has been taken from you, right? Like, largely, that has been taken from you. But it has not been taken from you on this, So, to me, that's this is the Royals opening up, the first time in a long time, one of the avenues of acquiring talent. And they have to be open to things like this. The money's spent, it's gone anyway. For the life of me, I can't figure out what was going on. I always felt like it was a Dan Glass. We're not going to take money from them. They're going to have to pay. Like, just not getting it. Baseball is not widgets. It's not spam on a shelf. Okay. It's very different than the Walmart model. And, I give John Sherman and his ownership much credit for understanding that and greenlighting this kind of deal. I mean, they love old guys for their league. That's the one thing I will say. Like, I would have been more excited if it had been an 18-year-old in A-ball that was wild with lots of strikeouts, from Latin America. They love the old guys. Like, that's, that's the one thing that kind of infuriates me. Not infuriates me, but that's the flip side of how excited I am about them eating money. I'm just as kind of frustrated that, Wyatt Mills is all of 27, not going to be 27. He's 27 in 150 plus days and, still bouncing back and forth between the majors and AAA. And William Fleming in A-ball is over 23. I mean, and by the way, why aren't you more concerned about that subject? Because you're the guy who taught me about that.
A couple of things. First off, regarding eating the money, yeah, it's an incredibly good sign. But what's so frustrating with the David Glass administration was that not only was it like they were being cheap, but they were being dumb. I hate to say that, but it's a sunk cost. Like, if they had released Santana, you would have had to pay all the money. Like, by trading, we say, oh, well, they're eating some of the contract. Yes, but the Royals have a lower payroll today than they did yesterday. The $1.5 million they're paying Santana, they're not paying Santana. The Mariners are picking up. That is more than what Vinnie Pasquantino will probably make about $400,000 if he stays on the roster. Right? A minimum wage spot for the next 90 games, 60% of the season is about $400,000. So they're going to save over $1 million here. So yes, it's not as much as saving all of his contract, but you were never, ever, ever going to be able to trade him for, and get the entire contract off your books. So it's a sunk cost. Better to save some money than no money, and better still to save money and get prospects. On the point of ages. So first off, 100% agree. It would be the one thing the Royals rarely seem to do is take the flyer. I wouldn't even say the 18-year-old in A-ball. If you're an 18-year-old in A-ball, you're already too talented to get in a trade like this. But the 18-year-old in rookie ball or the 17-year-old who's still in Latin America that nobody's ever seen, I'd rather have a lottery ticket that has a 10% chance of turning into something or even a 2% chance of becoming a star. You think about what the Padres did when they got when they traded James Shields to the White Sox. They got a quadruple A pitcher. I can't remember who it was that they got. And then the second guy in the deal was a 17-year-old who literally yet to make his professional debut by the name of Fernando Tatis Jr. Now that is, once in a generation kind of move, but the Royals may have been on the other end of a similar situation on the wrong end of that with the Padres. If you recall, when they traded for was it Trevor Cahill and
Ryan Buckfitch, was he
Ryan Buck? No,
Brad Hand?
No, I don't think Brad Hand. I think the fact that we can't remember who the Royals got, but I can tell you who they gave away is the problem. Matt Strom, I think, was one of the guys they gave away, who had a decent career as a left-handed reliever. Not somebody you're going to cry about losing, but would have been better to keep. But to me, what was really painful in that trade at the time was they gave up an 18-year-old kid from Latin America who was in the Royals Arizona complex by the name of Esteury Ruiz, who was hitting .419 at the time. It was only in 21 games, but was just destroying the ball and hit well after the Padres picked him up. And then kind of disappeared off the radar for the next couple of years, made it his debut in full season ball in 2018. He was 19 years old, hit okay, then hit a little less okay as a 20-year-old, then the pandemic. Last year didn't hit great. And then suddenly this year, here we are 5 years later, he's 23 years old. He hit 344, 474, 611 in AA. Was recently promoted to AAA. He's hitting 362, 488, 609. He has an OPS of close to 1,100 on the season. In 66 games, I'm glad you're sitting down for this because it's really painful. 22 doubles, 2 triples, 13 home runs, and 48 stolen bases in 66 games. When the Royals traded him, he was a second baseman. They have since moved him to center field. He's 23 years old. Probably, that he's not old for his level by any means, but that's the thing. When you trade for an 18-year-old flyer, he could take 5 years to figure it out, and he's still 23, which is the age that the younger of these two pitchers the Royals got is today. And do you think the Royals could use a center fielder, like an everyday center field prospect with speed and power? Like, how would that look in Kauffman Stadium? So look, he hadn't hit remotely like this in 5 years prior to this year. He may end up still being a nobody, but I mean, Esteury Ruiz could end up being the best prospect that Dayton Moore has traded in his 16 years with the Royals. And if the Royals get bamboozled, it's not because they misjudged a player necessarily. It's because he was so young that nobody could judge him properly at the time. And that's the point. You take advantage of the volatility of an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old guy who could be nobody. He could wash out an A-ball or he could be a star. That's the type of guy that you would love to get. Having said that, Carlos Santana, I don't think you were ever going to get that level of play for him. You just weren't.
Right. Let's just to be official, the Royals acquired starter Trevor Cahill, San Diego closer Brandon Maurer, and reliever Ryan Buchter. Buchter? Damn near killed her. Padres get veteran swingman Travis Wood, 25-year-old reliever Matt Strom, and 18-year-old middle infield prospect Esteury Ruiz. Yeah, that one hurt.
It was strange because it hurt at the time, and then it stopped hurting for a while, and then suddenly one day I look up minor league statistics this year, and suddenly it's like I was stabbed all over again because I don't know what on earth Esteury Ruiz has done.
Scars. You were looking at the scars, and then there it is, right there.
There was a knife sticking out the other way. I couldn't understand it. I did not think we were going to go into an Esteury Ruiz tangent today, but that's the beauty of this podcast. You never know where we're going to go.
You don't. You just know that we either know what we're talking about or we'll look it up and figure it out after the fact, like we did right there about that trade. But you knew the biggest part was Esteury Ruiz. Who cares about Brandon Maurer, Ryan Buckner, or whichever, guys were slopping around? Esteury Ruiz right now looks like the absolute gem of that deal, and it did not work out. It is looking like it's not going to work out well at all. We know that year they didn't contend. They were in contention, but that trade didn't help at all.
No, it didn't. And I mean, I will say there's some allegations that the Padres traded damaged goods, like that they knew that some of the players they give up were not as 100% healthy. So I kind of cut the Royals some slack there, that they made that trade to try and contend, and that the fact that the players they got performed so badly may not be a complete reflection of the Royals there. Anyway, the Royals did get AJ Preller back, the Padres general manager, because he insisted on outbidding them for Eric Hosmer, which saved them an enormous contract, but also granted the Royals a compensation pick, which they then used on Daniel Lynch. So it all comes around in the end.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm not willing to say it comes around. We'll see how it all plays out. Although I want to see. I haven't looked over at the wonderful world of Eric Hosmer stats lately. 281, 342, 407. So he has cooled off quite a bit. That hot start.
I was going to say, even after he start, in the end, he's always going to end up around 281, 342, 407. Doesn't matter what he does to start the year.
Thought marriage was kickstarting the career, but no, the power. The question is, how many worms have survived over there on the right side of the infield? His assault on the dirt there between first and second base. We don't know. We'll have to call out to San Diego, which, by the way, I was just out in San Diego. Pretty town. I'm a fan of San Diego. Like other people hate it. Like there's a lot of people that
it's a real hot take, Soren. Wow, you've had a lot of hot takes in your career, but that one, I don't know, man.
I don't know. I think that San Diego's going to be something, Rany. You heard it here first, buddy. I think that might be a place to keep an eye on right there. All right, so we both, and I agree. I'm not trying to run down the trade. I think what they got, and I want to say this. I give credit to Dayton Moore and to JJ Picollo, because let's be honest, a lot of the fan base kind of laughed at him that. It kind of leaked out. I don't think they were quoted, but I think they clearly said it to some people, either off the record or at a time that people weren't sure if it was on the record. Somebody had said something from the Royals organization like, well, we're hanging on to Carlos Santana. And I know it was in print somewhere. We're hanging on to Carlos Santana to see if he can get going and we can get something for him. They did exactly that. And I think the fan base, I always think it's important to not make it personal with the front office and the coaching staff and all that, because it's your team. You're going to root for the Royals. So don't become team, I can't stand Dayton Moore, or I can't stand Mike Matheny. You can nitpick their moves and disagree with their moves and complain about their moves. At the end of the day, you want the Royals to win. And I think a lot of people missed the bandwagon and the party in 14 because they were still bitching about why Ned Yost and Dayton Moore should have been fired. And I don't want to see people do that again. So this was
I learned my lesson that, because I remember it took me some time to kind of let go of that in 2014. And it was very freeing when that hot starts, that hot stretch in late July, early August. I realized that I would be happier just going with the flow and admitting that, maybe I was wrong about the Will Myers trade, et cetera. So I'd like to think I've learned from that. And I'm happy to say I was wrong about not, keeping Carlos Santana around and giving him that opportunity. But the one thing I will say is the fact that he made such a dramatic turnaround is, yes, it's a credit to the Royals that they stuck with him, but does that also say something about just how much Terry Bradshaw was holding them back? That what changed? I mean, on May 18th, Carlos Santana was hitting 122 with a 195 slugging average. All right. And that was 2 days after Alex Zumwalt took over. So if we're going to give them credit for sticking with him and for getting Carlos Santana turned around, we probably should at least acknowledge the fact that the only reason he was in that hole in the first place was because his previous hitting coach could not fix it.
Right.
And on that subject, I mean, I mentioned Jorge Soler. I do wonder if the fact that the Royals did actually get a pretty decent return for Carlos Santana stems in part from the fact that this happened with Jorge Soler last year, and teams were understandably a little bit skittish about trading for a guy who, even though he seemed to be fixed, was hitting 192 with a 288 on base and a 370 slugging average when he was traded last year for a guy who, whose defense wasn't exactly his calling card. But after the trade with the Braves, and he went to a team with an excellent hitting coach, and Kevin Seitzer was fantastic. He had an 882 OPS for them, and then was the World Series MVP. And does that establish credibility that, you know what, sometimes a guy gets broken when he's on the Royals, but if he gets fixed, if we can fix him, then you can fix him, I guess is the point I would say. And that maybe gave him the credibility to get more for Carlos Santana, because they could point and say, look, Jorge Soler did what he did after we traded him last year. You're getting the real Carlos Santana now.
I don't want to forget what Matt said here. SungWoo, hot stretch of 14. Remember that? The SungWoo was all the rage when he came over from Korea. So important little memory 100%. Lane while we're going down memory lane.
To me, and when I talk about the emotional kind of letting go of my anger, honestly, to this day, I still give credit to SungWoo because his optimism, his sort of just sort of innocent, I'm going to root for the Royals no matter what, and the sheer joy of his story, it melted my heart. I mean, I was like the Grinch, and he really made my heart grow 3 sizes back to normal, and allowed me to just say, the hell with it. Maybe I was wrong about this team, about this front office. I'm going to go all in and root for them. And I don't think I would have enjoyed it nearly as much without that.
I think that's great. I also want to point out, Chris Thomas, hot take by Rany, season 1 of Stranger Things is the best season of television ever. That was a Rany hot take. I don't know that it was on the podcast, but it was definitely said to me. And I would like to update you, Rany. My daughter and I watched episode 1, season 1.
The first episode.
On the plane back from L.A. We went to San Diego and then up to L.A. On the plane back to L.A. Last night. This morning, the wee early hours. By the time we actually took off, it was morning. And so far, so good. The first one, very good.
You're going to stick with it. Good.
Oh, yeah. Going to stick with it.
I don't know if I can't remember saying it was the best season of television ever. Maybe,
yes.
But it's.
I have a memory of quotes.
Okay.
But exactly what you said to me was, it's the best season of television ever. Season 2, pretty good, but not as good. Season 3, even better than season 1. So I'm still trying to unravel that riddle of the best season of television.
So the season 1 is the best season, but season 3 is better than. I think it was the perfect. I've described it as the perfect season, and
maybe that's. To
me, there have been 2 perfect seasons of television since Breaking Bad ended in the last 10 years. That was season 1 of Stranger Things, season 1 of Ted Lasso. I would also put in that category.
Yeah, it was very good.
And I will say season 4 of Stranger Things is running hot. We're going to get the finale here in a week. But it's still at its absolute peak. Like, this has been a very enjoyable season. So I'm glad you watched the first episode. Maybe we'll start doing a retro podcast of Soren reviews Stranger Things. That might actually probably get us more listeners than talking about the Royals.
It took 4 minutes for me to see a bunch of nerdy kids sitting around a table playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I went, okay, I get it. I get it why Rany is on board with this one.
They were basically that they were like a grade above me, and that was the same year I started playing. So it's like, yep, these are my homies. I'm in my element here.
So fantastic. I tried to play that. Like, I like playing with the graph paper, but I couldn't get into the whole, roll this dice.
You never go half nerd, Soren. You have to go full nerd.
Yeah, I failed.
I definitely succeeded at the full nerd part. That's one thing I can say.
It was back to the sports almanac for me. That's all I had. Like, who has the record for rushing yards in a college season in Division II? Let me look this up. We talked about the trade, and we're both on board with it. The Royals get something they need. They also open up room for Vinnie Pasquantino to come up. Mm-hmm. What are the expectations for Vinnie Pasquantino? Which, by the way, I had JJ Piccolo on the program today, which people go to 810whb.com and check out the program podcast page if you want to hear that interview. It was in the 4:00 hour, so the third hour of today's show. And, which, by the way, thank you to JJ Piccolo again for giving us some time on what was obviously a busy day for him. And he, again, I said, listen, do you expect him to hit the ground running, or do we have to be patient and expect some bumps? And he said, patience and expect some bumps. Then Mike Matheny said, yeah, we're going to get him out there. But we got to be ready if we see him struggling to pump the brakes. I'm like, I'd never heard Vinnie Pasquantino. I mentioned this to Curtis, who works with me. I said, yeah, have you heard Pasquantino in an interview? Because I'm waiting for and I love the guy, Kevin Apier. I don't know how he was so dominant, because I would interview Kevin and he was so nervous. He was always nervous during the interview. And I finally said to him later on, I was like, Kevin, like, what's, come on. He's like, I didn't like how that sounded. I didn't, that sounded stupid. I go, you're Kevin Apier, man. Just like whatever you say is going to be good. Just relax, let it go. You're the guy. People just want to hear what you have to say. I'm the guy who has to try to make it sound good. You just say whatever. I go, if it's goofy, you're a character, man. You can't lose in this situation. Right. I said, now, if you go into broadcasting, come call me. And then I'll tell you then you got to get some things right. Right. But I'm expecting kind of a Kevin Apier, and again, Ape, one of my absolute favorites. But I'm expecting that kind of nervousness. The guy was funny, charming, talking about, I was taking the trash out, and I get a text, and I know it's probably, he doesn't text me, so I got to get busy. And so I'm doing things I wouldn't normally do. I mean, it's this charming little story, seemed totally relaxed and ready for it, and played the room fine. I'm like, why do they seem to be so, I mean, I get why they don't say, oh yeah, look out. Like, here comes 30 home runs in the second half. I understand that. You don't want to put false expectations, but they do seem a little, I don't know, a little more. Maybe it's because they're all in on the guy and they're trying to talk themselves into being more cautious. I don't know, but he sounded great.
He's a fascinating guy as a player, and also as like an interview as a person. As a player, that's obviously easier for me to evaluate that. I think it's
you're not a psychiatrist in addition to a dermatologist.
No, I get my brother on the line. Maybe we can have him.
God, the Jazayerli doctor family. That's all I needed to know. I didn't know your brother was also. Oh my God. Okay, so how does his skin? How's his complexion? Is that good?
Yeah, I need to upgrade to 8K. I think on my TV screen so I can see every pore on his face. But
by the way, just full disclosure, when I was in Los Angeles and I was on the campus at USC, and we happened to across the practice field, and there's only one little doorway to get into the USC practice field, and it was open, and there was this huge invitation only 7-on-7 high school football tournament going on. My daughter and I snuck into, and it was open. So I'm like, we snuck in because we didn't belong. We weren't family or friends or anything. And just so FYI, I got too much sun. So if you see the red face, didn't have my sunscreen on, standing outside watching 7-on-7 football at USC earlier.
You're fortunate we're doing this through a low resolution internet streaming, or I might be lecturing you right now, haranguing you, and going over proper sunscreen application techniques, which I really don't think anybody wants to hear.
Full disclosure, the old guy part, I got it on the top of the head too. I should have been wearing a hat. So
that never happens to me. The top of my head never gets any sun. It's really weird how that.
All right. Works. So anyway, my bad. So back to Pasquantino.
So as a player, I mean, I think it's a reasonable expectation for him to be a league average first baseman this year. And when I say league average as a first baseman, that means, a 110, 115 OPS plus kind of player, like an above average hitter. Because it's not simply, his stats translate. Well, yeah, they certainly do. I mean, he had an OPS, about 978 this year, 948 this year, 957 last year. I mean, really impressive consistency ever since he came back from the pandemic. A-ball, AA, AAA, his numbers are eerily consistent, right? But beyond that, it's the polish. And when I say polish, it's the fact that he not only has a great command of the strike zone in terms of his strikeout to walk ratio being basically exactly 1, which is terrific, but it's his ability to hit for power while having a strikeout rate this low, right? I mean, we've talked about this before, but last year, between A-ball and AA, 64 walks, 64 strikeouts, 64 extra base hits. Incredible symmetry there, if nothing else. This year, in AAA, now moving up to the highest level, because last year, half the season A-ball, half the season AA. So AAA this year, He finished his last game before he got promoted. I think he had 3 walks, which makes the stat work because he ends up with 36 strikeouts, 36 extra base hits, 37 walks. Just eerie. Like the walks and strikeouts, it's unusual, certainly for a player, and especially in modern baseball. Just in the last 10 years, the strikeout to walk imbalance in the sport has become such that having a strikeouts equal to walks is unusual. But you can do it. I mean, that's possible. Nicky Lopez, before he got called up, I remember he had 20 walks and 5 strikeouts in a month in AAA. I mean, you can do that. But to be able to hit for power and not strike out, that is much more unusual. Strikeout to extra base hit being 1-to-1, almost unheard of.
And it's almost like they were waiting for the moment that the walks got beyond the strikeouts. 37-36.
Right. It's like, you walked 3 times on Sunday. Okay, you're ready now. Finally.
Now you're ready.
But I was shocked at just how rare this is. And to give you an idea.
But I want the numbers, but then tell me what's more likely to continue. Is he likely to continue this walk to strikeout rate and that he's going to compromise power to be that, or is it more that the power will stay there and the strikeouts will just go up?
My suspicion, the adjustment, at least at the beginning, will be, I would imagine there'll be a deterioration of his strikeout to walk ratio first rather than his power. Like, I think the kind of hitter that he is, he punishes mistakes. There are fewer mistakes in the major leagues, but when those mistakes occur, he will punish them. But he's going to strike out more. I mean, you just have to. Like, pitchers in the major leagues are witches. They do things that, to baseballs that should be illegal, and they're not. And so he's going to strike out more. But his strikeout rate was, 12.2% this year? I think it was 12.5% last year. Like, major league average is 22%. His strikeout rate could almost double, and he'd have a league average strikeout rate. And a league average strikeout rate, when you have above average power, that's perfectly fine. So I don't think he's going to be, I mean, in the minor leagues, he struck out 64 times in a full season last year. Like, nobody strikes out 64 times in a full season anymore. But if he strikes out 120 times in a full season, that's perfectly fine, because I think he's capable of hitting 25 home runs. And if he hits 280 with 25 home runs, that is a league average first baseman. It's a first baseman you can win, you can go to the playoffs with. But I don't think people appreciate just how unusual his ratio of power and contact is. So I did some number crunching today, and I don't know if you saw my tweets. I tweeted on this earlier, but I ran a list of every player since going back to 2006 who in the high minors, AA or AAA, had a season in one of those levels where they had at least 220 plate appearances. Okay? So here's 220 plate appearances, at least 10 home runs. And then I looked for guys who had at least as many walks as strikeouts, at least as many extra base hits as strikeouts. All right, so we're talking about a guy with power, a great power to contact ratio, great walk to strikeout rate, great plate discipline, and ability to make contact without sacrificing power. All right. And then I said under the age of 25, because there were a bunch of like 29 and 30-year-olds who, veterans who had already been in the majors and went back down and dominated, but weren't really prospects. Those 5 requirements since 2006. You want to know every player who hit those milestones. Yeah. Alex Bregman in 2016 did it for the Astros. Vinnie Pasquantino did it last year. And Vinnie Pasquantino did it this year. That's the entire list.
Bregman and Pasquantino.
Bregman won in the last. The number, the Fangraphs says is breakdowns go back to 2006. So I couldn't even go beyond that. I think it would be more common if you go farther back, simply because strikeout rates were much lower. Like, this is the rarity of this is a modern phenomenon. I mean, think of this is like what Albert Pujols was doing, every year in the major leagues. Incredible power while also not striking out. But it's very difficult to do that nowadays. Alex Bregman and nobody else. And then Pasquantino has done it in 2 consecutive seasons. That may mean nothing, but it may not, it doesn't guarantee success, but it just tells you how rare his combination of power and contact is. And that, that makes me really hopeful that he will not have the kind of adjustment that so many Royals players have had, hitting prospects when they get to the major leagues and they need, a season or more of adjustment time. I'm really hoping he'll hit the ground running. And I think, in the short run, he's better right now than Nick Pratto. Maybe Nick Pratto will be better in the long run, but maybe Nick Pratto is better off his trade bait. We'll see, because I really think this guy. I saw him at the end of last season as a guy who might be a contributor, but I really wasn't sure he was an everyday starter in the majors. You do this 2 years in a row, and suddenly you've proven enough in my eyes that he should get the chance to start every day.
Listen, it's just a matter of time before Pratto is playing left field or catching, something that just makes no sense.
Yeah, make him a left-handed throwing shortstop. Why not?
It's coming in some way, shape, or form to try to make.
He'll catch. Melendez will move to right field.
I'm wondering here's my wonderment, and this is probably my Royals fandom pessimism. I hope you're right. I hope he's Alex Bregman. And Bregman plays a more premium, obviously third and short for the Astros. But if Bregman played first base, his bat more than plays at that. And so that's what you hope. But I'm wondering if the strikeout rate is too low. And I bring that up, like, let it go, kid. Like, would he be even better if he took bigger cuts and was willing to strike out? Because, I look at Aaron Judge, because I was thinking, like, who's a guy in the 24 range when he comes up and hit for power? And just like the first name that came to mind was Aaron Judge. And Aaron Judge might even have been even older now that I think about it. How old is he? He's 30 this year. So in 19, he would have been 27 when he was finished up. So he was 16. So he was 24. So yeah, he's about the same age, right? So that would have been 6 years ago. He's been 24. That year at AAA, before he came up, he was 19 homers. He had 47 walks. He had 98 strikeouts, 276, 366, 489. Right? The 366 and 489 are very much, they're not even what Pasquantino was. So, but he struck out more. He was willing to take a big cut and let it rip and turn around and walk back to the dugout if need be. That's my fear on Pasquantino is I think he's going to be a good player, but is he going to be a great player? And to be a great player at his position, he has to hit the ball over the wall consistently. And I wonder if he doesn't need to take a bigger cut.
He might, but I think comparing him to Aaron Judge it's like comparing like a young pitcher to like Nolan Ryan.
Well, I'm not trying to say he's the same guy or
right, but but looking at Aaron Judge as a model, Aaron Judge is one of one in so many ways. One is the fact that, like you said, his minor league performance was not that impressive. He was kind of a raw, toolsy guy. And so many of those guys do not pan out when they reach the major leagues. I mean, I don't have to bring up Bubba Starling to make people understand. Athleticism is not enough. And I was skeptical when Aaron Judge made it to the major leagues that he would make contact enough. You talk about, he needs to be willing to strike out more. I was worried about Aaron Judge would strike out too much. And I mean, Aaron Judge did lead the majors in strikeouts as a rookie with 208, but he also led the league in walks and home runs.
Yeah, 52.
52. And I think is just an all-time major league great when it comes to just scaring the bejesus of little kids. The dude is 6'7", is listed at 6'7" and 282. Now, Pasquantino is not a small guy, 6'4" and 245. But there's a difference between 6'4" and 245 and 6'7" and 282. Aaron Judge is something the likes of which physically we have almost never seen. So I'm a little bit nervous about comparing him to them. But and to give you an example of another player that you could say the same thing about would be like Adam Dunn, if you want to go back a ways. Adam Dunn is kind of the Aaron Judge skill set, but a little bit less athleticism, a little bit less offense, and was a really good hitter early on, but had no defensive value. Wasn't he? Was he the one known as the Big Donkey? Yeah, Big Donkey, Adam Dunn, right? Mm-hmm. And again, these are extreme swing and miss guys. I don't think you have to necessarily sell out for power and strike out 180 times, 200 times in a season in order to get maximum value. What I like about Pasquantino, though, is he could do that. Like you can always go from striking out too little and swing more and let it rip more. Yeah, it's much harder to go the other way. I mean, even somebody as uniquely gifted at contact as Tony Gwynn could change his ways late in his career. You may recall the kind of famous meeting between Tony Gwynn and Ted Williams. You talk about conversations you'd love to hear. There's the Tony Gwynn and Ted Williams conversation, and the Nolan Ryan speaking to Rany Jazayerli conversation that they credit with turning his career around, right? But I think it was, I want to say before the 1997 season. Tony Gwynn, who at this point is like 35 years old, 36 years old. Going into that season, he had, won 7 batting titles, but was, not a power hitter and was a really, really good player, but maybe not an elite. And Ted Williams had a conversation with him in spring training where he just sort of said something about when you get that inside pitch, let it go. Those are the words I remember. Like, go, don't be content to take an inside fastball and hit it between the shortstop and the third baseman and go the other way like you do with every other pitch. Like, you can turn on a pitch and hit it for power, and because you have the hitting ability. Power comes after hitting ability. If you have the hit tool, you can get to your power. If you have power but no hit tool, you may never be able to get to the power. And then Tony Gwynn went out there, hit at career high 17 home runs, still won the batting title, had one of the best seasons of his career at age 37, and credited Ted Williams just with essentially a thought process to get him to start hitting for power in his late 30s. So Pasquantino, I don't think he'll necessarily need to do that, but I think the hit tool is there, and I think that will give him the ability to adjust his approach to it for more power if he needs to.
And Rany, see if you can grab your mic and bring it up a little bit closer. I think your cord might be caught on it. It's getting a rattle on your mic there.
I think I'm just getting too excited and everything's moving around.
I think that is it as well. I think it's your overall excitement for where we sit.
Well, I mean, Vinnie Pasquantino is the next Tony Gwynn, is what you just heard me say, right? So
that's the way I was taking it. That is definitely part of what I was hearing from you. We're talking about the deal, Vinnie Pasquantino now having a spot and coming up and getting to play. Just real quick. So, what do you think his career is? I mean, call your shot. We have no idea. There's still so much to go, but just what do you expect when he's done wearing a Royals uniform? How does it end? Any kind of way to signify what you think he's going to be?
I think he's going to be a fan favorite guy who, mans the position, either first base or DH with Prado for the next 6-7 years. Hits, like I said, 280, 25 home runs, somewhere in there. Could be, imagine in terms of being at the plate, a Billy Butler type, but with not, without Butler's defensive issues, a faster, more athletic, more charismatic version of a Billy Butler, maybe. And depending
why
on
would you say that? Why would you say that? Because every guy that's come up for the Royals has been less than whatever they build them as defensively.
Well, because I'm saying that because you can't possibly be a worse defensive player than Billy Butler. Like, that's not exactly, praising him. That's, if anything, damning him with faint praise. I'm just saying, like, if he can hit like Billy Butler, he'll be a better player than Billy Butler, because everything Billy Butler did that wasn't at the plate was, a 20 on the 20 to 80 scale, basically.
Right.
But I mean, so much of what it comes out, like, the reason we think fondly of Billy Butler is because he had postseason moments. Like, it ultimately comes down to, does he get to perform in the postseason? But if he does, I mean, he seems like, he's a really interesting quote. Like you said, he's really laid back, kind of says some interesting things, kind of fearless in a way as an interview, right? Because he's not worried about embarrassing. He's not worried about saying something that might be taken the wrong way. And I know fans already are, he's already got kind of a cult hero status, and some of that is the backup quarterback syndrome. Nobody's seen him play yet. But if he is even an average player, I think he could become a very beloved guy in the city.
Let me ask you, would you take 265 career home runs, 900 driven in, 262 batting average, 356 on base, 477 slug?
Yes. Yes, I would. That seems like a no-brainer to me. That's a long and pretty distinguished career.
Highlights of his career with a 3-year stretch where he hits 27, 26, 38, and 21 home runs, 4-year stretch there. You okay with that?
Sure. Sure. Home runs in 21, topping out in your 40 home runs. Sure.
This is my best guess at what he will be. Is this player.
Matt Stairs. Okay. Now the big difference there is Matt Stairs did that in like the height of the high offense era. Like those numbers are, if you put up if Matt Stairs put up those same numbers in today's offensive environment, he would be
in today this year. But give it 5 minutes and the balls will be going out like racket balls. I mean, come on. It's overcorrected this year. They'll be bouncy next year. Let's not act like we've gone back to the dead ball year and they're throwing from a 9-foot mound. They'll tweak it back the other way. I mean, I hear you, and I agree. But I think people will be like, "Oh, Matt Stairs is going to be better than that," because they think of Matt Stairs with the Royals, who, by the way, wasn't bad. 267, 345, 451. I mean, Matt Stairs' OPS his 2 years with the Royals was 796 and 818. Okay, but early in his career, he had 27, 26, 38, 21, 17, 16, 20, 18 home runs. And like I said, a career 356 on base and a career 477 slug. He's an 832 OPS player. If that's what he is, I mean, I do think there's ceiling to be better than that. I'm not calling this ceiling. Calling it a prediction on what he's going to be.
Matt Stairs is, as a hitter, Matt Stairs, I would happily take that. Matt Stairs, the value of Matt Stairs provided was dinged by the fact that he just was not a good defensive player wherever you put him. Like, I mean, not just not good, he was like legitimately bad. And I don't mean that as an insult. He was
a lot of
my favorite players. Yeah, one of my favorite players in the game. And, ultimately, by the end, he was still contributing as a pinch hitter, right? He had like a massive pinch hit home run, I want to say, for the Phillies in the age of 40. He didn't get he had a total of 10 career postseason plate appearances before he turned 40. And finally got a chance and hit a massive home run. So, yeah, Matt Stairs is a fun guy. And if Pasquantino can hit like him, I would consider that a successful career. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've had some Bob Hamlin and Ken Harvey stuff thrown around, and I think those are, he's got more power than Ken Harvey. But Bob Hamlin, that's a cautionary tale. A guy who won a Rookie of the Year and couldn't maintain it.
Actually, let me give you the ultimate cautionary tale, because when I was doing this research on batters with that kind of power and speed and walks compared to strikeouts, there were a lot of names of guys who didn't quite. Nobody, like I said, hitting that many extra base hits as strikeouts is rare, and that was the tough one. But there were a lot of guys who came sort of close and also had a lot more walks than strikeouts. And one guy who was on that list twice was a guy you may remember by the name of Kila Ka'aihui.
Yeah.
And I mean, I should go back and remember just how dominant Kila's minor league numbers were. I mean, just in terms of OPS, they were better than Pasquantino's, and he was not, and he was about the same age. That's definitely a cautionary tale. The two things I will say that make me feel better about that: one is the Royals never believed in Ka'aihui, and I guess they were right, because he never really caught on with them or anyone else. Whereas I do think they believe in Pasquantino. And then the second thing was Ka'aihui, his extra base hits were like lots of home runs, but very few doubles or triples. Like he was a fly ball hitter, and the fly ball went over the fence. Great. But what Pasquantino has done, I mean, he hits doubles, he hits some triples, even. Like he hits the ball hard. And if it's not over the fence, it might be in the gap. And I think that's, that makes me feel more confident as well.
All right. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about a move that was made. And I mentioned it with Eno Saris today from The Athletic. I know you're a fan of his work. We talked about Wes Johnson, and I think this is flying way below the radar screen. And I think it's flying below, and I didn't really have time to get in this from a Royals perspective today, but I plan on talking about it more in the future. I'm on the program, on the radio show. But Wes Johnson left the Minnesota Twins to be the LSU pitching coach. Now, that can be viewed as nothing but a demotion, like taking a lesser job. And, I heard some people say, well, lifestyle better, shorter season, warmer, wet, all this. Did some research and found out, he said, Johnson was making $350 with the Twins, and he was at the upper end of the pay scale for pitching coaches. And he was going to LSU for $390. And he's like, do you really take a step down? He said, but it wasn't just the $390. He had all the incentives in his contract that like college managers get. winning the SEC, winning the SEC tournament, going to the College World Series, winning the College World Series, all came with bonuses that could take a salary to as high as $750. There are no bonuses like that given, at least that he mentioned, that Eno mentioned, or that I've ever heard of with pitching coaches in the big leagues. And this, to me, like, the first reaction is, God, do big league teams just not value pitching coaches? I mean, when you think about even in the NFL, yes, head coaches are $8 to $10 million at the top of the pay scale, but coordinators are $2 to $4 million, $2 to $3 million now. Even in college football, coordinators are getting over $2 million. And pitching coaches they're different. They're more, they're not quite, they don't game plan the strategy, but they're very important individuals. And it seems like, if the Royals had an opportunity to really go out and get it done, it's to go out and try to throw more money at the best hitting coaches and pitching coaches around. This is where they could spend, it seems like, $4 or $5 million, litter their system and their big league club with the best hitting and pitching minds out there, and really have a huge advantage over their competition. Like, this seems like an untapped market. And college is besting the big leagues, and the Royals, as a small market team, have to wake up.
I will tell you, the Wes Johnson news hit me like a thunderbolt, and it wasn't so much that he left. I mean, that certainly surprised me that he would leave a major league team for the SEC, and especially that he would do it midseason. I still find that kind of surprising, given that, college baseball season doesn't begin until February at the earliest. Was there no way for him to honor his contract with the Twins until the end of this season and then immediately transition? And yes, I know there's recruiting, and yes, you want to start with these guys, but leaving your major league team in the lurch in midseason, I will admit that's surprising to me. But what gobsmacked me was when the news came out that he was probably going to make more money as a member of the, it's not even the head coach, the pitching coach for the LSU Tigers as compared to the Minnesota Twins. I was astounded that with all of the advances that major league teams have made in terms of resource allocation, just being smarter, the front offices today are so much smarter, so much larger, so much better run than they were 10 or 15 or God knows 25 years ago when I started doing this, that a good pitching coach, high end, like you said, in terms of the pay scale compared to his compatriots on other teams, is making $350,000, which is half of the major league minimum salary for a player, a salary which, mind you, the players finally got that up to $700,000 this year. It had been in the $500,000 range. I would say the $700,000, even the major league minimum, is probably too low given how much revenue is in the sport. But the 26th guy on your roster is making twice as much as your pitching coach is utterly astounding to me, because I thought after all these years, almost every market inefficiency had been squeezed out of the sport. I mean, 20 years ago, walks are important was a market inefficiency. And then it was,
defense.
Defense for a time. It was drafting young players in the draft. There's all these inefficiencies. And it was just simply using analytics in general, having an analytics department, and then having one that you listen to. And I mean, just consider how many people work in the typical analytics department of a major league team now. It's like 10 or 15 guys. Teams are throwing so many resources at the analytics side, which I completely agree with, but they're paying peanuts to a coach that has, and I would say a pitching coach and hitting coach have more impact today than they've ever had in the sport, because they have so many resources when it comes to video, high-speed video, to help guys.
Yeah, and two things. One, Eno said that LSU had better analytics than a lot of big league clubs, that they were spending the money on that part of the equation. And by the way, it's been a little while since LSU was the LSU that we remember. And so They're hungry to get back to where they were baseball wise. But the other thing is, if you're like, hey, Alex Zumwalt, it's all set, we're good, we got our guy. I mean, be nervous, right? If Pasquantino hits and gets going, and Bobby Witt Jr. is raking right now, and all these guys, I don't know, what are we, 6 months away from Vanderbilt going, we'll take you. Right?
Well, I mean, is it
South
Vanderbilt
Carolina.
or the New York Yankees? I mean, it could be anybody. Like your point about,
I think that's the thing that's interesting. I don't think they can just come grab a guy.
I mean, with the major leagues, your contract would have to expire, right? You certainly can't do it mid-season like this. Like here, the reserve clause does not apply to college, so you can leave the major leagues at any moment for any job, whether you want to go work for Goldman Sachs, go ahead. Like it's different if it's another major league team, yes. But the point is, if these guys are making such little money, some team out there is going to wise up, and you don't have to start at $3 or $4 million. If these guys are making $350,000, double their salary. That's nothing to any major league team. The Royals, the Pirates, the Brewers, all of these teams can afford to go out and spend top dollar, whatever top dollar is for a coach, to get the best coaches at that spot. And the problem is, of course, once you can only do it once, because once you do it, everybody's going to finally copy you, and in 5 or 10 years, the arms race will be over. And just like as recently as 10, 15 years ago, you could, spend peanuts and build out an analytics department and have a huge edge on every other team, or 26 of the 30 teams. Now you can build out your department, and the edge you might have is minimal because everybody's doing it to some degree. And I bet you if whatever team there's going to be a first mover advantage. Whatever team seizes on the low pay of coaches to get the best coaches up front is going to have a massive advantage for 3 to 5 years. But if you're the 8th or 9th or 10th team to finally embrace that trend, you're only like a year or two ahead of everybody else, and that advantage is going to be minimal. So if I'm astounded because I thought all these inefficiencies were gone. The obvious market inefficiencies were gone from the sport, that there simply wasn't an avenue by which a small market team like the Royals could gain an edge on other teams that are spending 2 or 3 times as much money. So to find out that there is actually that avenue is exciting, but it's also unbelievably annoying that the Royals continue to employ Cal Eldred.
Matt put this up here. He said, how much are the Giants paying Andrew Bailey? I have no reason to believe he's wrong on this. I can't confirm that he's right, but he said, just found it, $507,000. So, I mean, that's where we are at the big leagues. That's probably on the high end. And it speaks to, lo and behold, the Giants are pitching savants.
Right.
And they're paying the best guys. It's funny how
I wonder how much Matt Blake, who's the Yankees pitching coach, makes. A really unknown name. Like, I've barely heard of the guy. Never played in the majors, I don't think. But, like, the Yankees have a 2.94 ERA this season.
Yeah, and that's the scary part if you're a Royals fan is early on when Billy Beane was pulling the wool over people's eyes and even the Rays 10 years ago when they were getting it done, the Red Sox were kind of coming around, right? They made the run at Billy Beane, and then they went and got Theo Epstein, got their own smarty pants. J.P. Ricciardi up at Toronto. They kicked the tires on that for a little bit and then quickly went away from it. But there was not the Dodgers and Yankees and Giants, big market teams, Astros are all in on finding every inequity. And that's the thing is the Royals have got to see it. And I think the thing that was scary for me is J.J. Picola mentioned about that when I asked him about, hey, Dayton talked about we're building a pitching lab. It was 2019 that Milwaukee opened theirs, or 16 that Milwaukee opened theirs. The Dodgers have had one for a while, whatever you want to call it. You've got to identify that. And he's like, well, we spending $12 to $14 million is a big investment for us. And I get that. He's like, we want to see and make sure we're doing the right thing before. That also means you've given everybody else a 4 and 5 year head start before you can decide that this is a valuable instrument. And I think that's where you can't miss.
The Royals spent $13 million for one season of Zach Greinke. And I love Zach Greinke, and I'm so thrilled he's here. But, like, if you can spend that on 1 year of a veteran guy, you can't spend that much money to completely revamp your pitching development for a decade or more.
Yeah, over $3 million on Eric Mejia, a couple million, I think, on Suli Matias. I mean, I can back out some Latin American spending that if you walked away from it for a couple of years, could pay the bill on that. And I don't think listen, I think it's because I don't want them just splashing around bad cash. Okay, and I can pull out every mistake that they've made, and there are also successes that are out there as well. But they just have to be on the cutting edge. They have to be, and if that means spending to get on the cutting edge, They have to get there. I don't want to breeze past. I want to mention Jackson Kowar because I think one of the things why, and I'll come back and Caderna, Mazzucato, Lacey, this next wave of young pitching, the last a couple of years, guys that they gave a lot of money to, have got to come through in my opinion, because I think they could have a pretty good bullpen with Jackson Kowar and Brad Keller. And what everybody's going to see off the performance tonight from Kowar, 3 1/3, 2 hits. At one point, he was 2 1/3, 2 hits. I think he was 1 walk and 4 Ks.
Well, Soren, today he struck out the side.
Yeah, and I want to finish.
First time in his career.
Yeah, for the first time in his career. He finished 3 1/3, 2 hits, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. 5 base runners on 3 1/3 is concerning, even though none came around. I just want to be clear that is too many base runners. Now, the 5 strikeouts helps, but again, it ended up being 5-3 strikeout to walk ratio. The longer he went, the worse he got. And I think if you can develop pitching, if you can find pitching, if you can, get a rotation, your bullpen will be lights out. Jackson Kowar can be a lights out 9 batter guy. I think that's what he needs to be. And my fear is that they're going to see this and be like, yep, back to the rotation. And he's not ready for it. And if he's ready for anything, it's an opener role. Or if you want to put an opener in front of him and then piggyback him and see if he grows beyond it. But
he wasn't ready for it in AAA this year. He had a 6.34 ERA in Omaha, and every appearance was a start. This is the first time. Only 2 relief appearances of the season were the 2 he's made in Kansas City. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, it's a guy with this much history of failure at the major league level. Let him prove he can be a reliever first. Like, don't even think about him as a rotation guy right now. And what we saw today, yeah, I think that in short stints, he's going to be great. I think it also is not a coincidence that he had one of the best outings of his career after not having been around Cal Eldred for the last 2.5 months. We've talked about this before. The first outing a guy makes when he comes back from the minor leagues is his best outing. His second outing is worse. His third outing is worse than that.
All right. You got anything you want to add about Kris Bubic's latest performance?
I've said Cal Eldred's name already.
Okay.
I've already exceeded my quota. We're at the point now where it's like Kris Bubic pitches this badly, and I'm not going to blame Kris Bubic.
Let me come back up here. Did Cameron have it, or did he tweet me? Somebody tweeted me. Yeah, that's what it was. Cameron tweeted me. He's there in the chat room. If you're catching us, he says to me at Soren Petro, first 4 pitches after Eldred mound visit, ball up, base hit to center, fouled straight back, and lined about 500 feet foul. it's when the expected happens over and over and over again.
The fun thing is now is that everybody, like the Cal Eldred mound visit is become its own drama now.
If you're watching your game, if you're watching the game and you have, like I do, like numerous different text threads with different groups of friends, and you have a Royals group, every time he comes out, you got to text your friends, mound visit, because it's time to either get in front of the TV or get in front of a phone and start watching what happens, because that's becoming the biggest track thing going in Royals baseball right now. A couple things real quick. Salvador Perez down. This opens up opportunities for the young players to play. MJ Melendez, Cam Gallagher. The Royals can find what they want. Got a reaction to him trying to play through this injury?
I mean, this is one of those things where, again, we don't know what was going on behind closed doors. I tend to have a pretty high estimation of the Royals training staff. But the fact that he had an injury, right, I think they originally called it a grade 2 injury, which typically takes about 3 weeks to heal. He came back after like 11 days off the injured list. And, I remember the first couple of days, he was like 0 for 18 or at one point, and we were mocking the Royals for playing just because he was playing so badly. And then he started to hit because he's Salvador Perez and you can hit through anything apparently. But the fact that he then re-injured it and a more severe injury that now requires surgery at 8 weeks out, somewhere in the decision process, there was a mistake. And I hope we're not back to the days of 2008 when Coco Crisp was brought back too soon and blew out his elbow and was out for the season. There were like 3 guys that year that got hurt early in the year. This was my first little dust up with the Royals when the trainer who is no longer with the Royals was probably letting guys play through injuries that they shouldn't have. I don't think this is a training issue. I think that this is Salvador Perez is Salvador Perez. He wants to play. He wants to play 162 games behind the plate. Like there are a few players in Major League history who enjoy playing as much as Salvador Perez, and that's wonderful. But the Royals need to look out for his best interest in the long term, and I think they may not have done that here.
You can't build a culture where everybody says, yeah, I can go. I got another batter. I got another inning. And, every player, if you're going to write his name down, is going to answer the call and be there. You can't build that culture and then say, well, it's up to the player to come tell us when he's hurt. Like it's one or the other. Either you're going to urge everyone to fight through or you're going to urge everyone to sit. But ultimately, it comes down to you on whether or not they play. I want to get to our minor league minute. First of all, a couple of things here. Irish Mac says, I can't say Asa Lacy because I bring him up all the time. So I'm now no longer allowed.
You have your two words you can't say. I have my 2 words that I can't say.
Those are my two. Those are my 2. And then my apologies, Matt. You don't need to apologize. It's one of the reasons why I've been around long enough. I said I can't confirm this. I had no reason to disbelieve it, but Matt says sorry. He says the numbers on the price on Andrew Bailey, the salary on Andrew Bailey, he thinks aren't right. He's going to look for it, so we'll see if we can get it on what that is. But like I said, I will reiterate what Sarah said earlier today on the radio show, and that is the 350. He said 350 is what Wes Johnson was making with the Twins, and what he was hearing was that's at the top, maybe not the top, but certainly sound like one of the top 2 or 3 salaries out there. I wouldn't be shocked if the Giants are paying more, but Wes Johnson 350K is up towards the top. So just for that, we'll hold on that 507,000. We'll see if we can find that figure, and we'll give it out at a later date. Follow Rany and I on Twitter. We'll maybe correct that one if we can find it. And Matt, always appreciate the effort. No worries, brother. Thanks for trying to contribute to the podcast. Where do you want to go with the minor league minute?
So this week, because last week we talked about, I think it was Logan Porter and just brought up the positivity, but a guy who maybe isn't an everyday prospect, but an interesting guy. I want to go to another guy in Double-A now who we have not mentioned yet, but who actually might have like future everyday potential, and that's a guy by the name of Tyler Gentry. Okay. I don't know how about you. 3rd round pick from the 2020 draft, so 2 years out. University of Alabama guy, toolsy guy, big arm, big power. That was the pandemic year, so he was incredible for Alabama in like 17 games, but the season was cut short, and so it's hard to know if it was for real or not. Last year, debuted in high A ball, which okay, he's 22, not young, but you go straight to high A ball to make your professional debut isn't impressive. He had 259, 395 on base, 449 slugging. The on base there, 395. He had a really good walk rate. But missed a good chunk of the season with, I think, tendonitis in one of his knees. Only played 44 games. So still kind of not sure what he was. And the Royals debated starting him in Double-A this year. They ended up sending him back to A-ball. And he might have been the best hitter in the entire organization in April. And was promoted to Double-A about 2 weeks ago. He hit 336 in A-ball with a 434 on base, 516 slugging. He's been in 10 games now in Double-A. Only hitting 237, but 3 home runs. Got slugging 526, and impressively, only 5 strikeouts in 42 plate appearances in Double-A. And this is a power hitting right fielder. And we've talked a lot about the Northwest Arkansas hitters this year. We've talked about in different weeks Michael Garcia, Michael Massey, Nick Lofton. And we talked about Porter last week. Now we're talking about Tyler Gentry. We haven't talked about Tucker Bradley, but he can go on this list. All of these guys have shown really impressive strikeout rates. That's the one thing that really stands out. All of these guys have strikeout rates of like 15% or less. So I don't know.
He's 26%.
Gentry? Well, but since being promoted to A-ball, he's at like 12.5%. It's a small sample size, but it's a lot less. You're right. It was 26 at A-ball, and it's actually dropped in Double-A. And even in a small sample size, to go from A-ball to Double-A and see your strikeout rate drop that much, it just, who's ever the hitting coach in Double-A, is that Christian Colon? I actually think that might be Christian Colon in Double-A.
Is it really?
I know, but no, I believe Christian Colon is working with those guys. And again, if it was one guy, it wouldn't matter. But I mean, Michael Massey, we talked about him. He's actually got the highest strikeout rate of all of them, but also the most power. And he was promoted to AAA, and he's hitting 348.
No. You know what? You're on the right track. Assistant hitting coach Christian Colon.
Assistant hitting coach.
The hitting coach we used to call Tool Time. He's a former Royal.
Tool Time.
We called him Tool Time because the Royals talked about him. I don't know if it was Dayton or if it was somebody around the organization that called him a 5-tool player. Abraham Nunez.
Oh, that's right.
Abraham Nunez is the hitting coach, the assistant.
That is interesting because that was a guy who you said had all the tools but never really learned it. But you never know with like coaches. The old expression, those who can't teach, right? Well, sometimes a hitting coach is guys who didn't make it themselves can turn out to be great coaches. And I don't know if Abraham Nunez is a hitting savant or if it's just the Royals have a nice collection of talent there. But I would throw Tyler Gentry into the pile. He's only 23, and if that strikeout rate, if he can keep it down, he's a guy who might actually be an everyday outfield option. I mean, our bar for outfielders with the organization is lower than other positions. They just don't have a ton of elite outfield prospects. We talked about Diego Hernandez, who might be in AA very soon already. But I think these are guys who might project as everyday players. So shout out to Tyler Gentry.
Yeah, and the Royals, the more the merrier when it comes to the prospects. By the way, I do love this. Cameron Fletcher putting up their assistant to the hitting coach, apparently the Dwight Schrute of the let's see, and then I love this. Matt found his problem. He said, "Yeah, it's actually Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey, 500,000 pounds a year." That's all I can find. So there is an Andrew Bailey who makes 500,000.
But he's not American. He's not making American money. Okay.
So just for the record, there was no inaccuracy if you read all the way to the end of the fine print. All right, that's going to do it for us. For the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, you can follow him at Jazayerli is where you can find Rany on the Twitter. Right? Did I get that wrong? I write it all the time. Yeah. It's just at Jazayerli. J-A-Z-A.
Just have to know how to spell Jazayerli.
Yeah, Jazayerli. And you'll get some interesting misspellings when you fat finger the keys. I always do. You can follow me, Soren Petro, at Soren Petro. We do this normally Sundays at 10 p.m. We'll be back at it this coming Sunday at 10 o'clock. We say thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman Corner.